Hello and welcome back to The Who Look. A couple of weeks ago, I did two different videos on why actors left the show. I did one for the Doctors and another one for the Revival Companions. Now I'm back for a third video for the Classic Era Companions. So let's start off with Carol Anford. Carol played the Doctor's granddaughter, Susan, and was part of the show from the very start. But she was also the first companion to leave the show. Carol joined the show on a lot of promises about her character, which involved a very quirky costume and telepathic powers. After casting her, they decided to remove a lot of aspects about the character to try and make her more of a simple teenager, which made Carol unhappy. She decided she didn't want to be part of the show anymore, partially because of this, and also because she felt like there was no progress with her character. And once her initial contract ended, she left the show. She would later return, however, in the 1983 Children in Need special. William Russell was part of the cast from the start, and he departed the show 6 stories after Carol left. He never planned to stay on the show for too long, and after almost 2 seasons on the show, he was written out after requesting to leave after asking to be given a happy ending for both his character and co-star Jacqueline Hill's character Barbara Wright. He left in 1965, but eventually made a cameo appearance in 2022's Power of the Doctor, where he broke the Guinness World Record for the longest gap between television appearances. Jacqueline Hill was also in the show from the very first episode, and lasted the same amount of time as William Russell. She requested to be written out of the show during season 2, as she felt that she had accomplished all that she could do with the show. This coincides with what I said before about William Russell leaving and the show writing them both out in the same story, with the characters returning back to their lives in London. Like Russell, this wasn't her last appearance, but unlike Russell, her future appearance would come as a new character in 1980. Maureen O'Brien was the first actor to join the show as a companion during its run rather than being part of the show from the first episode. She joined the cast to replace Carol, who had just left the show, and while she did enjoy working with her co-stars, she didn't enjoy working on the show itself. When new producer John Wiles joined the show, he was unhappy with her attitude and decided to have her removed from the show. Although she regretted joining the show originally, she was later content with staying on the show if she had been asked to do so. So by the end of her time on the show, her departure was a bit of a surprise. Peter Purves joined the cast to replace William and Jacqueline, but his time on the show, like Maureen's, ended with another producer change, which resulted in the new producer wanting more action-based scenes and realism, so they decided to remove Stephen from the show. Adrienne Hill came in as a replacement for Maureen, but she only lasted a total of 5 episodes across 2 stories, as the writers found it challenging to write for her character because of the character being so out of her time. After 5 episodes, they decided to write her out by having her character sacrifice herself in an airlock. This made her the first companion to die on the show. She was briefly replaced by Jean Marsh, who played Sarah Kingdom for the rest of the episode, but due to scheduling conflicts, she never stayed on as a companion past the story, which led to the writers killing her character off as well. Jackie Lane then joined the TARDIS as their replacements, but her stay also didn't last too long either, and she left the show at the end of her initial contract. Whilst the choice wasn't fully down to her, this was actually down to the changes that the show was going through, with a change in the producer, the same producer who removed Peter from the show. Michael Craze joined the show in the same story that Jackie left, and his character Ben helped the Doctor during the story before stepping aboard the TARDIS at the end of the story. He was the joint first companion to witness the first regeneration of a Doctor, alongside co-star Annika Wills. As with the trend of other actors, he left due to more shake-ups that the show was doing, actually leaving the show prior to the end of his contract. Annika Wills joined the show alongside Michael and was also the joint first companion to witness the show's first ever regeneration. Although she was a part of Hartnell's run originally, she found it very difficult with the changes the show was going through, and she was eventually written out of the show at the same time that Michael was. Fraser Hines was the first actor to be a proper companion that the second Doctor took along with him, considering the 2 previous companions carried over from the first Doctor. He was the first Scottish companion in the show. He planned to leave the show much earlier than he actually did, but he was convinced to change his mind by his doctor, Patrick Troughton, who was planning to leave at the end of the season, and personally asked Fraser if he could stay along until the end. Deborah Watling joined the show as Victoria in 1967, and she departed the following year. She loved working alongside Patrick and Fraser, but she requested to be written out of the show earlier than she was meant to leave, but the producers attempted to persuade her to stay on the show. She would refuse staying, and left 6 stories earlier than her contract stated, meaning that the scripts that had originally been written included her and needed rewriting. Wendy Padbury was also paired up with Fraser and Patrick, and she lasted until both the actors left the show. She was originally asked to stay for when John took over the role of the Doctor, but she declined the opportunity in favour of leaving with her co-stars. Nicholas Courtney was part of the show across multiple Doctors, first meeting the second Doctor, and then worked alongside the third Doctor throughout most of the Doctor's time exiled on Earth. He would also spend time with the 4th Doctor, the 5th Doctor, and the 7th Doctor. Whilst he wasn't a proper companion in terms of travelling with the Doctor, he was a close ally of the Doctor though, and a friend. The role of the character was to be around during the Doctor's exile, and once that was over, he became a character who would pop up every now and then. He made his final appearance on the show in the final season of the classic era. He would later return in the spin-off show Sarah Jane Adventures, and was due to appear on the show one final time where he would come face to face with the 10th Doctor, David Tennant, but he couldn't film the scenes due to his health issues. John Levine is in the same boat as Nicholas was. Although officially does get listed as a companion, he wasn't a true companion of the Doctor. Once the Doctor's exile was completed, the character was deemed done with and would only appear on occasion if needed. Caroline John is another casualty of the producers, as when the production change happened, they believed that the character of Liz Shaw was too smart to be with the Doctor, and the show needed a companion with less intelligence who would need the Doctor a lot more. Although plans to remove the character was made by producers, Caroline herself was in the process of planning to leave the show due to her pregnancy, so either way, she was going to be leaving the show. Richard Franklin portrayed Mike Yates, who was another character deemed as a companion by some, but not by others. He was written out of the show after he became an artistic director for a youth theatre, which limited the amount of time he had for Doctor Who, which led to the final decision to fully write him out of the show. His character left the show after taking medical leave from UNIT before quitting altogether, although Richard believes that the show originally intended to kill him off. Katie Manning joined the show as a replacement to Caroline and became the companion for 3 years. When it came to her time to leave the show, it was because she felt that it was the right time to leave and wanted to pursue new acting opportunities. She would later return in the Doctor Who universe in the spin-off The Sarah Jane Adventures for 2 episodes. She was also due to return to the show one more time, but due to Elizabeth's death, they never got round to filming the episodes, and the show ended. She would eventually make her way back into Doctor Who in 2022, along with other companions. Now getting on to Elizabeth Sladen. She joined the show as a replacement to Katie, who left the show in the previous season. She left the show after 3 seasons as well, as she wanted to leave the show before people got bored of her character, deciding she wanted to leave on a high. She would eventually get asked to come back multiple times throughout the rest of the classic era, but she wouldn't return. Her departure actually led to Tom Baker requesting if he could travel alone instead of getting a new companion. Elizabeth did eventually return to feature in the pilot episode for a spin-off called K9 and Company, but the show wasn't picked up. She would eventually return to Doctor Who for the revival era, meeting the 10th Doctor a few times, and also being given another attempt at a spin-off, The Sarah Jane Adventures, which ended after 5 seasons after her death in 2011. Ian Marter joined the cast of the show, as the production team expected to cast an older actor to play the 4th Doctor. The role that Ian was going to have was to do a lot of the action scenes. However, when Tom Baker was cast, they decided they didn't need Ian like they planned, and only kept him around for Tom's first season before writing him out. Louise Jameson was brought onto the show to replace outgoing Elizabeth Sladen. However, she decided to call it on her time on the show, as she decided to take the opportunity to do some theatre work. John Leeson was the voice of everyone's favourite robot dog, K9. He would eventually leave the show because he was concerned that he was getting typecasted as the voice of a robot dog and not being able to get future work. However, this didn't actually stop him from doing more of the role of K9. He would return for the pilot episode for the spin-off K9 and Company with Elizabeth Sladen, and he would come back for the revival era for a couple of occasions voicing the character again, and for the Sarah Jane Adventures spin-off. He also voiced the character in another spin-off called K9. Mary Tam joined the show as the Time Lord companion Romana, and left the show after 1 year in the role, as she felt her character as a Time Lord was being reverted back into the role of a normal human companion. However, then producer John Nathan Turner stated that she left because she was pregnant, something that Mary has denied. Even though Mary was leaving, she was playing a Time Lord companion, so her departure didn't necessarily mean the end of the character. Which is where Lalla Ward came in. She took over the role of Romana, becoming Romana 2. She began a relationship with Tom Baker, which resulted in on-set issues as the relationship was reportedly very tense. She would later choose to leave the role while Baker stayed behind, and things supposedly returned back to normal on set, and their relationship also improved. Although they would later marry and then divorce a couple of years after. Matthew Waterhouse joined the role of Adric. However, he decided to leave the role because he was disappointed with the lack of development his character was having. The character was eventually written out by being the first companion in 15 years to be killed off in the show. While he was happy to be leaving the show after the lack of development, he was surprised that they were killing him off. Adric's death would still haunt the Doctor all the way up to the 60th anniversary, where he was mentioned in a conversation between the 14th and 15th Doctors. Sarah Sutton joined the show during Tom Baker's time on the show, and carried over into Peter Davison's time. Peter and herself got on very well, with Peter calling her his perfect companion. However, John Nathan Turner had decided to write her out of the show, which disappointed both Sarah and Peter. Janet Fielding also went from Tom Baker to Peter Davison, but she only took part in Tom's final story. She would eventually decide to leave the show when it was also announced that Peter was leaving the show. She eventually returned in the 2022 special Power of the Doctor. Mark Strickson was added to the show to be a character who was double-crossing the Doctor. However, the development he was promised for his character didn't pan out like he was promised, and it led to him deciding to leave the show. Gerald Flood joined the show to voice Chameleon. He was due to be a longer-term companion on the show, but the production team found it difficult, having many issues with the prop for the character. Because of the issues, it was decided that the show would write the character out, so they wouldn't need to worry about the prop anymore. This also meant that Gerald would have to leave the show. Nicola Bryan joined the show for Peter Davison's final story and as a replacement for Mark and Janet. She signed up to the show with a 3-year contract, but when the show was briefly put on hiatus, it wasted some of her time on the contract. When her contract finally ended, she was offered to stay on the show, but she said no to the extension and left. However, she did ask for a dramatic storyline to end her time on the show. Bonnie Langford was then brought in as the replacement for Nicola. However, the production team didn't seem to be too keen on her casting, and they wrote her character to basically just scream monsters in the show. When Bonnie left the show, she asked to be written out because there was nothing more for her to do on the show. The production team tried to write her out as quickly and simply as possible, but Sylvester McCoy had to fight for her to get a proper goodbye. She would later return in 2022 for a cameo alongside other companions, and again for the final episode of the 60th anniversary. She later said that she asked to be written out because no one had even bothered to ask her about staying. Sophie Aldred was the final companion of the classic series. She replaced outgoing Bonnie and only left the show for the same reason as Sylvester left, because the show was shelved. She later got a chance to return in 2022, where she got to have some more scenes with her Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. Yes, I know I just said that Sophie was the last companion of the series, and that's true, but that's because Daphne Ashbrook wasn't part of the series. She was a companion in the TV movie in 1996. Although her character refused to join the Doctor in his travels after the adventure, she could have easily returned in the show if it was picked up after the movie, but the movie was deemed a failure, and a new series was never picked up from the movie. And that is all the companions. Obviously, as I said at the beginning of the video, I have done one for the Revival era companions, and I have done one for all the Doctors. If you haven't already seen, I've partnered up with Force Dalek to join up on his Discord server to continue to build a Doctor Who community across multiple channels together, so don't forget to join and interact on the Discord if you wish. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoy this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.